un autore che ha costruito nell'arco di relativamente poco tempo una filmografia fatta di film che hanno toccato il cuore e le emozioni di milioni di spettatori. Alfonso Cuaròn incarna per noi un'idea molto preziosa, quella di un cinema libero che si mette sempre in discussione e che osa rischiare, un cinema che osa essere popolare, profondamente d'autore e che non perde mai il gusto, il piacere di inventare. Questo è un evento per noi estremamente atteso e non avremmo potuto farlo nel modo in cui lo stiamo facendo senza la fiducia e il supporto di un amico molto prezioso, Ronaldo Chamat, che è stato con noi e ci ha accompagnati in questo viaggio, quindi grazie Ronny. E adesso vorrei invitare sul palco Alfonso Cuaròn.
No? And did your family was involved in the cinema business or not?
Not at all. Far from it. My family was a very middle-class family in Mexico. They had a university education, but my father was a doctor. My mom was just a chemistry. Had nothing to do with film.
Where this passion for movie coming from? Where your passion from?
I fell in love with films since very early age. Ever since I remember, and ever since I remember, I wanted to do that. It was I had the first glimpse of a memory of a film that I saw was, but I only remember for many years. I only remember like 1 second of it. That it was with Merlin gets his beard stuck in a door in the sword on the stump, you know. But I didn't differentiate between films as a child, make believe, and what an actor and a director and screenplay, everything was kind of the same thing for me. There was no difference.
So cinema sold like one thing.
It was some sort of make-believe, also the films that I was watching, you know. So everything was kind of a make-believe, and I just was kind of addicted. I wanted to see that, or I wanted to see it on television. And then, yes, obviously as a child in that period, I got like also into the TV shows, you know, certain TV shows of that period. And but again, it was not much of a difference between one thing. Then I started going to the cinema more often as a child, as often as I could, or in television, watching films on television that they used to show a lot of films. And one night, my parents had gone for a dinner. My cousin was staying with me. And we decided to break into my parents' room and watch television, you know, hoping that we were going to watch adult shows. And then there was a film that they were going to play, because they would play films late at night that I have never seen. And they had a warning saying that it was only for adults for some reason I don't understand. And I watched that film and completely changed my perception of cinema. And that film was Bicycle Thief. And I found myself crying, completely moved, but I was exposed to something that was very different from what I have known before. At that point, I already knew what the job of a director is, because I had seen a documentary a short documentary of the making of one of the Sergio Leone films, and also the making of Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. So I saw, okay, that dude is the director. You know, that's what I want to do. And in Bicycle Thief, I was very confused. I didn't understand what the director had done. It was kind of story that was very emotional, but at the same time very grounded in a reality, without ornaments, and that pretty much created a curiosity to see more of those films. So I would try to sneak at night to watch those films, and I have to confess that I didn't understand them, because I mean I saw Godard's Vivre sa vie. I was 9. I didn't understand it, but I was fascinated by how it was made, that it was so different. So sometimes I would get bored, but I will go back to them.
Was that that point that you decided that you want to become a director? And first of all, was it your first choice to be a director, or you were interested in all the process, being an editor, a director of photography?
Well, at that time, first I always wanted to make movies. I didn't know. When I said, what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to make movies. I didn't know what that meant. Then I learned there was a director. I said, I want to be a director. But for me, director was director and the director of photography and editing and stuff. Everything was all together.
But in the end, you still do that because you almost edited all your movies. Because you think that the editing project is part of the creativity project of the movie.
Well, now I cannot separate one thing from the rest of the process, but I guess it's the same as many filmmakers, many young filmmakers, and I guess that many filmmakers outside, like a big studio system and stuff, in which to make your own films, your early films, you have to do everything. You know, pretty much you have to do everything, because otherwise, you could not afford anything else. So I started editing my films. It was kind of matter of fact that that's what you would do, you know, and then I got used to it, because I didn't see the difference between. Well, it's an extension. I mean, the screenplay is pretty much just putting in paper the film that you see, and editing is kind of putting it together and rewriting if you're mad. But yeah, and also because I guess that for good or for ill, my approach to film had never been overtly narrative. It was more about the moments, how the moments were constructed.
At school, you meet one of the most important guy of your life, Emanuel Lubezki, that was now is an important director of photography, and he was the director of photography of all your movies, not Roma, but all the others. How was the relationship between the two of you?
Well, I met Chivo, we call him Chivo.
Yes.
I met Chivo before film school. I met him in the Cine Club cycle. It was a golden time of Cine Clubs in Mexico. We had films from everywhere, amazing films. And on top of that, there was the film from the cultural sections of the embassies, the French, the German, and so on. But most importantly is that Mexico was the only country in Latin America with relationship with the Eastern Bloc. So we had access to all the Soviet cinema, all the Czech, all the Hungarian, all the Polish cinema that was happening at the time. And there was a familiar crowd of young people that you would meet in the different places. And some of these cinemas, of these cine clubs, it was crowded more by young people, not because of the film, because at the end of that screening was the point of departure for the parties. Yeah, and so you will go there to meet girls and go to the party, and I met Chivo there, and then we were the geeks talking in a party, yeah, and eventually I'm older than him a couple of years, went to film school first. Then he entered, and I was a cinematographer at film school, and he was my assistant until I saw his first Super 8. And I said, wow, no, he's the one, he's the guy. Even since his first Super 8, his work was already incredible and inventive.
You together made a short movie called Vengeance is Mine. Is it true that you were kicked out from school because
I didn't do that. Well, I work on that. I helped Luis.
Like director of photography?
And I was the director of photography. But the director was Luis Estrada, who did later many successful films in Mexico. And yeah, Chivo was my assistant in that one. It's true.
It's true that you were kicked out from school because of it. What happened?
Look, it was because of that. It's just the director decided to do the film in English. And it was a gangster story. He wanted to do it in English, and it was an offense in the school that also was very highly ideological. Not academic, but highly ideological. And yeah, that was part of, that didn't help. So the matter is that it's a combination of two things. Except two teachers, the school was a mess. But at the same time, we were so fucking arrogant, We were so we would make obvious how, all the flaws and all there was a lot of ignorance, let me put it this way.
So, did you write your first movie with your brother? And how could you arrive to direct your first movie? And then I heard that there was some distribution problem with the Mexican government. What happened?
Okay. Well, it took me a long time to direct my first film. I guess that many different factors. One was an insecurity about writing, I guess. And it was interesting. Yesterday I had a conversation with at the school. And you could see that anxiety about the writing. And I completely relate with them, because it's very daunting, and I really thought that I couldn't do it. And I was always trying to write a screenplay that didn't work. But the other important factor is very early on, I started having a career in different positions in film, for survival, more than anything else, for money. Also, I had a son when I was very young. I was 20, I had a son. So, pretty much film became my way of earning my living. So I worked as a boom operator for like 12 films. I worked as an assistant editor, I worked as an assistant cameraman. I would do little gigs as an editor myself or cameraman in very, very small little things. But my longest career then was as an assistant director. And I really thought that I was not going to have a career anymore. I would see all my peers, people I collaborated in film school, that they were directing films, and I was an assistant, and it was kind of, there was a kind of sad resignation about it. I was very lucky that I was offered to do these kind of episodes of a TV thing, but it was more like Twilight Zone, a little short. I could write my own short and direct it, and so I wrote and directed, and I photographed some of my own and edited some of my own stuff. And it was when Chivo asked me very candidly, without and he just very candidly, he didn't want to be offensive or anything. He says, so what's your next step if you're doing these things? Because I was working for the TV company who was financing those. He says, after this, you want to do telenovelas? And I was so offended, but at the same time put me in my place, because I was like, what the heck am I doing? And it's when with Carlos, my brother, we wrote my first film. And it was the moment in which cinema had finally opened up for young people in Mexico. The landscape where I grew up in Mexico was a bit oppressive. The previous generation to mine, they had it the worst. Like, I think in like 6 years I was their youth, when they were supposed to be with their first films. The production in Mexico was like 2 films a year, always by the old guard. So it was, the landscape of doing films in Mexico was impossible. And then this politician, one president came, and populist and whatever, and he gave money for cinema. And a lot of people from the young generation at that time, including it was Mariano Varo, Diana Rothberg, and other great filmmakers. We had our first break there.
But there was a problem with distribution, you told me, of the movie.
Well, first, I didn't get along with the authorities, with the bureaucrats, and they told me that I would never do a film again. And so I knew that my life in Mexico was back to either doing telenovelas or commercials, and I didn't want to do either. But I managed to sell the film in the US to Miramax. And that was the first time that Harvey Weinstein screwed me. The first, there was another one, but that was the first one. And because he took the film out of the market, and then he walked away with it when nobody was already bidding for it,
Yeah.
And yes, and I was very depressed because I had put all the money I had, and I had a lot of debts to do my film, because I was adamant that the government was going to be my partner. I didn't want to be the government, the owner, because I didn't want to play the game that they do. That you have to be kissing the ring of the power over there. And because of that, they got upset. And I ended up with no distribution, and no money, and also in debt.
A child.
I'm with a child, yeah. And I never planned to go to Hollywood, never. I mean, when I was a child and I was watching Poseidon Adventure, saying, "Oh, I want to do films like that." But Sidney Pollack saw my first film, and they flew me to LA. They offered me a job, and then that pretty much stabilized a little bit my money situation. The film opened in Mexico, and it was a huge hit. With that, I paid the debts, and yeah.
But the first job you made in the US was an episode of Fallen Angel, right?
Produced by Sidney and Stuart Gordon,
Yeah.
yes.
And in an interview, you say that you feel really uncomfortable and very numb on the set of that episode. You're not first comfortable with yourself. Why?
I was terrified. He gave me this, it was 5 short films. All of those, it was a series that it was going to be 5 short films, all of them based upon short stories of noir crime classics of the 50s and 60s, 50s and 40s. and from Donald Westlake to Chandler and so on. Not only that, they had like top directors directing everything. There was Steve Soderbergh, who was like after Sex Lies and Videotapes and all of that. Jonathan Kaplan, who had won the Oscar for The Accused. Phil Joannou, who was the most famous young guy at the time. And also Tom Cruise directing one and Tom Hanks directing the other one. And I was the new guy. And my English wasn't so. I was so scared of everyone. And on top of that, every time I had my 6 days to shoot the thing, and they will come back and say, you know what? Now you have 5 because one of the Toms needs 1 more day. And then I had my location that I love. I prepared my locations. Hey, you know what? The other Tom likes your location. He's going to take the location. So I had no location. So I was like the ugly duckling. And I was terrified. And then I was working with Laura Dern, Diane Lane, and Alan Rickman. And I was terrified of them. On top of that, the location, the house, a beautiful Frank Lloyd Wright location, was under the Hollywood sign. And I would arrive and say, oh shit. And the thing is this, Alan Rickman can be very intimidating. He could be very intimidating just because he's very serious, has this super deep voice, and is very, very short in his expressions, but very clever and very sharp. And I was terrified of all of them. So the first day I started shooting, and it was a mess. It completely goes south at the end of the shoot, and I was really suffering. At the end of the shoot, I completely have lost it, and at the end of the shoot, I have done just like 1/4 of what I was supposed to do. So I stay, terrible idea, just to make it closer to the set, in the closest motel, that it was a motel, like very seedy motel in Hollywood. I wanted to cry. Literally, I wanted to call my mom, It was like I was so... And the next day, I arrived as terrified. And then the AD comes and says, the assistant director, and says, hey, Alan and Laura want to talk to you. And then it's the moment I genuinely think, okay, this is the moment that I'm fired. And I walk to this room where they were at this office, and there they are. And Alan says, hello, Alfonso. And it was like, that character in Harry Potter. And so I sit, and Laura starts very sweetly and says, we're here for you. The reason we're here is we saw your film and we know that you're a great director. And Alan says, we're here for you. You have to tell us exactly what you want. We're going to do it. We're supporting you. You're a great director. They kept on telling me that they saw and that they know that they knew that I was a good director. And he says, oh, please just tell us without fear what you want. And he says, okay. And so I came out of that, and they said, what happens is nothing, let's start shooting. Says, okay, where do we start? Says, we're going to repeat the whole day yesterday. And he said, you can't. You're already far behind. Says, I don't care. I'm going to repeat the whole day. And I'm just saying this because that is an example of how people in your life, that cross in your life, and suddenly gives you a vote of confidence, can change everything. That day, I shot everything of the day before, every day of the second day, and half of the third day in the day. just because you have, the embrace of people. And I would be crazy if I talk about my career being about myself. It's about Sidney Pollack, about these people, about Luis Mandoki in Mexico, José Luis García Gracia in Mexico, so many people that they pave your way. And at the end, I finished on time, and that was the show that got the awards among all the other shows in the series.
So after that experience, how did you approach your next project, A Little Princess? Visually is amazing. I think it's the first time that you can see all the potential of your vision. And it's a fairy tale in a way that it's the power of fantasy to survive in the violence of the world. I was working on that movie. And how did it come the movie to you?
That film, from the moment I read the script, I was staying I was crashing in Chivo's sofa. I didn't have a place in LA. And because he started to work, he started to be more, he started having jobs before me there as a cinematographer. And he was receiving screenplays. And among them was A Little Princess. And I remember it says, oh yeah, that was offered to Alfonso Cuaròn. He wanted me to read it, but he doesn't want to do it. He said, it's really sweet, you should read it. I read it. It was written by Richard Lacrovenez, who had done The Fisher King. And immediately I knew I had to do that film. And I was developing in Hollywood means that you're just working on the script with the writer, the studio pays you some money, and that's how I was surviving. My passion was not fully in the project, but I was earning money. And another for the same studio was doing something else. So they told me it's unlikely that they will give it to you because you're already doing something else. I says, well, I quit the other one and I do this. Says, yeah, well, that doesn't mean that they are going to give it to you. And I went to the room and all these people, like executives, walk into the room. And, like the first guy who was seated already was this kind of shabby guy who was sitting there. And then everyone started arriving. And I just said what I wanted to do. And then I realized that the shabby guy was the head of the studio. Very smart. And he got to say, and for some, I hope that they gave me the job because they heard what I said. But I don't know if it's because when he was in the meeting, I was looking at him. And at some point he smiled. And for some reason I decided to do. And he goes like this. And he goes like this. I was saying, I go like this. Thank you. Like very soft, very quietly. And he didn't have anything. Sometimes I think that's the reason they gave me the job. Because a fake piece of lettuce in between the teeth. And it was an amazing experience doing that film. It was playing with all the toys that I have never played with, and a cast of 20 girls, and my son, who was the same age, was hanging with them, and he even played a part in the film. And it was fantastic. But at that time, and I had to say, I can't talk for Chivo, we didn't take ourselves so seriously about that. We were trying to learn. In my first film, I remember we said, if we can do one scene that is fine, we're happy. and that it looks good and technically, because Mexican cinema tended to be technically very poor at the time. And we were very concerned about the technicality of it. And in this one, we said, well, if we can do a film that at least is eloquent from A to Z, we're going to be fine. And I had kind of lost what I wanted to do. By the way, is to my memory, because I never seen my film since I shot it. For me is, I just keep the memory of them, and it's my most joyous experience. But then I completely lost my way there in that system. I went to do another film.
Yes, in fact, Great Expectation, that was kind of sexy with a cynical vision of love, but you say that you were not so really happy about it, the result of it.
The problem is that I was doing the film I didn't really fully understand the material, and I don't want to talk ill about it because some people who love the film, they have told me not to talk ill about it, so I have to stay more neutral. But I know that I remember my experience, and I didn't understand it. I was trying to struggle with it. What was the meaning? I was trying to overcompensate what I didn't have, understand, like, of the film with formalism. Look at me kind of angry. I said, next time, trust your fucking instinct. You know? And I was very unhappy, and maybe the best thing that happened to me is that it was also a flaw. And I, you know, because when I didn't understand, I thought, well, but with cool shit that I can shoot is going to be great. And it was not. And then I got very sad. I find that I had lost my way. I had found that it was a whole system, that it was like a piece for hire, that they have convinced me that I should not write because it would be difficult to find jobs. And I was living in New York at the time, and I rented I went to the video shop. There were still video shops with VHS. And I went and I rented like 30 films, random, but that I remember were films that had inspired me from the get-go. And I locked myself, and I just watched one after the other. And I was really upset with myself about having lost 5 years of my life reading scripts. And it's when I called my brother and says, come, let's write a screenplay. And we did it to Mama también.
Change everything. So you decide to reinvent yourself, going back to Mexico, make a movie that is so outside of the US industry. There is a coming of age, there is the discovering of sexuality between two teenagers and older woman, there is some nudity, but there is also this social tension on the background. So the movie was amazing. I remember I watched it in Venice when it was presented, we were there with the actors, and I didn't expect anything like that. So tell me about...
Well, it was this, I guess that the first time that I started taking the whole thing seriously, not only as a formal exercise and a craft, you know, but as a medium that you express yourself, not only illustrate. And that's the reason I have become ever since very worried about films that illustrate, you know, so I knew that one thing that was fundamental was the inclusion of a narrator, that I wanted to be completely, that I guess that I have taken the admiration that I have of certain narrators, particularly in the Nouvelle Vague, you know, that they are not a character, nothing to do with the story, and I want to do a film in which the background was in many ways more important than the foreground. And the foreground and background, they inform each other. And the narrator also was going to only contextualize from an objective, almost sociological point of view, and the only other commentaries that were going to be about death. Yeah, and foreseeing death, so that's in the future, that's in the past, or that's in the present. And it was because that story I had ever since before I wrote my first film. I didn't want to do it because it sounded like a frivolous story of two kids trying to get laid. And fun, but kind of frivolous. And it was not until we Carlos and I, we brought everything into a social context, but also into the context of other more important themes, like the end of innocence, death, and so on.
But it's something about death. It's very interesting the way of the girl approach death. She decided to live in a particular way before the inevitable end. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, and there are so many foreshadowings about that throughout the film. But then it was something in which I kind of, when I told Chivo about it, I said, Chivo, I want to do the film that we would have done before going to film school. The film in which we didn't have any rules, and it was only our love of movies that was guiding everything. And that was pretty much it. It was about, I recognize that the language that at the end of Great Expectations, I remember everything was so stylized and everything was painted, single color palette, and everything was, that we were shooting in a subway that was also painted and stuff. And at some point, and it was like the vibe, Chivo and I were kind of depressed. And the subway was underneath, and something came out to the day, and the light was hitting. And I was looking and I think it was a place in New Jersey or Queens, not very flattering. It was kind of ugly. And I turned to Chivo and I said, what the heck are we doing stylizing and creating realities? Look, there's nothing more amazing than reality. And I decided that in that moment I felt that I don't feel so comfortable with trying to stylize and hide. In many ways, when you stylize, unless you do stuff like Jack Tati, Wes Anderson, it's a way also kind of hiding from any meaning.
The movie was such an international success that bring you back to the US, in fact. You were called for Harry Potter because of that, because the author of Harry Potter was a huge fan of Y Tu Mamá También. I was working on Harry Potter that is completely different from Y Tu Mamá.
I never planned about the Harry Potter thing. It's just life comes in between. First of all, I have written already Children of Men because the film I really wanted to do is a film that I wanted to understand the thematics that were shaping the century to come, the 21st century, and the relationship with the individual in that one. But nobody wanted to do it.
Scary about it? Why they don't want to do it?
They didn't want to do it, they didn't understand it, and so I found myself one more time. Life sometimes guides, and in my case, I find myself with no job, no money, and now I'm going to have a child. And so I needed to do a film, and this was offered. I didn't want to do it. Guillermo del Toro gave me so much shit for saying no. I said, you have to read the book. I read the book. He said it in his language. You know Guillermo?
Yeah.
Okay, he told me that Yeah, in his own, no, in Mexican, really crude language. I don't know if the exact translation is appropriate for this forum. I went and read it, and I saw that it was great. Because I saw it, I remember, says, well, I'm intrigued. And then I spoke with Jake and Rollins, and I said, hey, I read your thing, maybe I'm wrong. But you didn't write anything about magic. You write about the passage of childhood into teenage years, but also about the whole social context of social classes. I said, oh, thank God you got it. Yeah? And I said, okay, maybe I can do something with this. And there was another thing, was very pragmatic. I knew that to do Children of Men, I would need visual effects. And I said, okay, I don't know anything of visual effects. It's going to be my kindergarten. And end up being my university. Yeah? And the other thing is, I'm going to be in London. I really need to absorb London if I want to do Children of Men. Because it needs to be organic, needs to be genuine. And so every day I was going through, writing down places that I will go through that they end up in the film. Every morning going to the studio, I will find locations. And
you use a reporter to prepare yourself.
I have to say that, but at the end, it was such a pleasure to do the film. I enjoyed so much. It was really a pleasure, and I love the universe that J.K. Rowling, and even if fantasy is not my thing, I love the universe that she created because it's so grounded in humanity, and so it was a joy to do that film. And then soon after, then they wanted to do, because Harry Potter, now they wanted to do Children of Men.
But the Harry Potter chapter is also the darkest one. Because you're nominated, do you share the same passion of your friend Guillermo del Toro about horror movie?
As an spectator, I love it. I love horror movies. And Miami, but very different, than Guillermo. Guillermo is way more oriented into a fantasy.
Yeah.
Or, well, sometimes it's what they call metaphysical horror. Yeah. I'm oriented into something that the horror that is more grounded. My aspiration is one day, yes, to do a horror film. But the ones, and I enjoy seeing many kinds of horror films, fantasy ones less so, unless it's Guillermo. And, but I love Rosemary's Baby, The Tenant. It's the Polanski stuff. I love some of the Babadook.
Yeah, from Australia.
That's so grounded in a reality, so in a reality and in character. So I love those. So I have loved, as a spectator, I have a wider taste, but something I feel that I could do, it needs to be something more grounded, I guess.
Can't wait to watch another movie made by you.
I would love to do one. I've been flirting, I've been trying to write something like that, and somehow doesn't fully works.
We are waiting for that. So let's talk about Children of Men. It's true that you start thinking about it when you were stuck in Toronto because of the 9/11.
That is exactly true. I was in Tu Mamá También presented at Venice and then Toronto. And then September 11 happened while we were, the day that they were going to show in Tu Mamá También, the same day. And I found myself stranded there with Diego and Gael. At least that was a relief. The actors of Tu Mamá También. But it was a very, I'm sure that most of you remember that time. It was very unsettling. It was a time in which we all immediately felt that so much was going to change, and unfortunately changed for the worse. But I was very intrigued about it, and I tried to immediately try to understand what was going to be the tendencies, and the tendencies were not very flattering. The tendencies were already predicting so many things, and it was very obvious. Someone they told me that yes, now it's become relevant because of the world that is now, and I said no, it was relevant before as well. I'm not talking about the film, I'm talking about the themes. It's just that we were in our bubble of complacency and wealth. It was still the moment in which there was a sense of wealth and capitalistic optimism and neoliberalist optimism, but it was there. And I says, maybe not in the green zones, maybe not in Europe and the US, but all of those images that you see in Children of Men, those are not science fiction. They were taken from the near present, from the Balkans, from the north of Sri Lanka, from Iraq, and together with the attitudes of populism and media manipulation that it was already, well, in Mexico I lived with that, so it was not so difficult to transport.
Yes, the problem is that are become more global and global nowadays. We are talking about immigration, of course, fertility, terrorism, all these kind of things are all now around us more and more.
But it was before. It was that we were kind of the example I gave is that in Tu Mamá También is a reality going on. Well, there's a bubble, the car is a bubble, in which these characters are in their own bubble. Completely sheltered from that reality. And then inside they have their own bubbles in which they create their mask and their, in which they cope with their own reality inside the car. And I said, no, it's at that period we were just driving a car in a bubble while all of this was happening around. And it has happened always in one shape or another. So, it's and the making of that film is we decided to take the same approach of foreground background. The background needed to be as important as the foreground, and not to do exposition and do exposition, trusting that audiences could make their own conclusions and also take the conclusions out of just visual elements that were, that they were presented.
And the styles that he used, that he changed again, was so amazing. I remember the sequences of the burning car, the long take with the motorbike chase. Did you use this long take in the movie moment because you wanted your movies sometimes are more similar to commentary, but more realistic if you're shooting like that?
It's two things. I mean, there was a certain reference, if you might, to Battle of Algiers. But Battle of Algiers has a lot of cuts. The whole thing of the one shot, I have to say, I always been since those days when I was a kid and watching films that I didn't understand, I recognized immediately that there was something of a language between the cuts and the takes and everything. Later I understood that has to do with time. And since film school, I started doing both, because and it's not that one language versus the other, cutting versus one-shot deals, because, you can see Touch of Evil and opens with the most incredible one-shot deal in cinema, one of the most incredibles. And then you see in the same film, the murder in the motel room, and it's like, I don't know how many cuts every second. It's just so weird, it's so great. So I always been fascinated by that, but since the Hollywood part kind of repressed that in me. You know, doing a little bit here and a little bit there, but nothing, you know, like I tried, like Great Expectations had a long take and stuff, but it was more like what I call the look mama no hands. You know, that's the problem I find with those shots sometimes, is they look mama no hands. And in Tu Mamá también it was when said you were going to keep the shot until the last consequence. And we start shooting everything using one shot deal, and then she would say, you know what? I think it's great. I love it, you know. And in Tu Mamá también has very long shots, it's just that the camera doesn't move. And she would say, but you know what? I think that just to make the point, why don't we cut once in a while? Just so it doesn't look that it's just a gimmick. It's okay, let's do it. But also always respecting the sense of time in each shot. You know, they're not fast cuts, but you know, like it's the time always, and the moment tells you, and allowing things to be off camera and stuff. And that became kind of something that even in Harry Potter has some very long shots, you know. But in Harry Potter, except maybe one, everything was with Mama No Hands because it was part of the whole spectacle. But also, there's one that I wanted just to convey the sense of time, but it's a little bit more gimmicky, if you mind. The one-shot thing, for me, the important thing is the perception, the audience experience of a moment, the audience experience of real time. That is a complete different thing than if you are manipulating time through cuts. And it was, I guess that it was more about that than about a realistic film.
Let's talk about Gravity. Why you decided to make a sci-fi movie that is not only a sci-fi movie, because in the end the story of two characters, two real human beings with a strong female character. In the end, when she falls down from the star to earth, it's like she's reborn. It's something that's very particular for a sci-fi movie.
That's one more time a film coming to rescue my life. After Children of Men, that was a complete commercial flop. You know, when it was released, nobody saw it. The reviews were lukewarm. And suddenly the appetite to work with me completely went down. And I said, okay, I don't care, like same as Tu Mamá. So I started writing and developing with Alfonso Cuaròn, my son, a film that I started prepping, that it was a road movie with our cast was Charlotte Gainsbourg and Danilo Torri. One more time, Guillermo del Toro. He has a great paraphrase. He says, when you're a child, I don't know if that's much an European thing, but in Mexico, because of the Americans, in the cereals, just to cut children and stuff, besides having sweet cartoons in the back and stuff, at the bottom of the cereal, there's a toy. You know, there's a little toy. And then you want to eat your cereal because you want to get to the bottom to get the damn toy. Very cheap plastic, things like the one of Kinder eggs. And Guillermo says, look, when you get a film that performs, it's like the cereal you have to eat, even if you don't like it, to find the toy. After Gravity, I found myself the first time in my life that I was financially stable. The very first time I was always kind of, it is another thing because I started with film as an act of survival. like earning my life and stuff, I could never take away the chip that I need to. There was a certain fear about my action. So I partnered with an amazing American company called Participant that sadly just disappeared. It was a company that all the projects were like social. They had to have a social impact. They produced a lot of documentaries by the guidance of David Lindy, who was, I know him since Y Tu Mamá También, and he was the big supporter of His Tu Mamá También. And they have done many films that won Oscars and stuff, but always trying to be responsible. And David agreed to put half of it. So I went to do, I wrote a screenplay that I wanted to do. I wanted to reinvent my process. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do everything completely different. So I wrote a screenplay, but the rule was that I was going to write it and not look back. Not look back, not do corrections. I finished the script. The only thing is I did a breakdown to get the needs. Then I shelved the screenplay. I started production. I didn't give the screenplay to anyone, nor art department, nor even my partners, a participant, didn't have the script. And I told David more or less what it was about. And the actors didn't have the script. And I reproduced all the spaces of my childhood. And then I shot in absolute continuity, so the actors were learning day by day what was going on in their circumstance. And it was, creatively in that sense, was very interesting. Emotionally, I have to say, it was devastating because I didn't realize that I was thinking as a filmmaker, the stuff I wanted to do and stuff. I didn't realize the toll that it was taking by reproducing the space of my childhood, putting the same cars that existed, extras that look alike the neighbors, and my family, they were look-alike at that time, dressed identical, like in photographs and stuff. And I was staging many scenes that had actually happened. And it was like going to, my memory of it is more about that. But I was pleased I did the film just because I knew I had to do it. Also, I completely changed methodology of many things. I guess that what I'll tell Chivo all the time is that the only reason I make a film is what I learn for the next one. And I get I don't think, like for instance, Harry Potter, they offered me the next Potter, and I didn't want to do it. And I didn't want to do it because, one, I didn't want to overstay my welcome, but more importantly, because I knew how to do it. And I was afraid of doing it just knowing how to do it. For good or for bad, the films I've done, I don't know how to do them. And so Roma was like that. I didn't know how to do it. I was trying to figure out as I was doing it. And the thing is this, I think that more and more I'm become more conscious about stuff that concern me or that I'm intrigued about. And at the end, I guess it's how the individual cope with reality. And I think that because beyond politics and all of that stuff, because politics is one more time to cope with reality. But there's another thing that I think we share as humanity, that is an immense feeling of loneliness in this vast universe in which only kind of love is the solace.